what I can do is I can start with my background and then I'll be out of the way. So then the star of the show can go ahead and do their thing.
It's good you're a star also.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so my name is Madhur. It's kind of like saying my door, like so Madhur, if that helps. And let's see, I'm one of the software engineers and technical coaches here at Outco. Quick background about Outco is that we are a career accelerator and we help people get technical, social, behavioral, emotional, all those skills to help them with interviews and during their job search. We also help negotiate. So that's what Outco is, and I'm one of the engineers and technical coaches here. Before Outco, I was an engineer myself. I was at this company called Medium. I'm sure a few of y'all have heard about that one. If you like read on Medium and maybe even get emails about recommended readings, I actually built that email client system. So sorry for blowing up your inbox, but that was me. But anyways, ever since then, I'm joined Outco, and yeah, it's been a great ride. Just being here, helping people learn about software engineering and leveling up their skills. So that's me, Sean. I would love to hear about your background and like the current roles you're in, and also education-wise to get us started. So it's all you.
Yeah, sure. But also I have to preface that with, wow, I had no idea that you actually worked at Medium. And I think I've worked with you for like half a year now, Madhur. So
Wait,
that's
really?
interesting. Yeah, that's
Solid.
very cool. I write on Medium, so awesome.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so
Quick plug already, I see.
Oh yeah,
No,
exactly.
I'm playing. Go ahead.
So hi everyone, my name is Sean Batir, and I currently work as a machine learning engineer at BMW. I'm in the Silicon Valley technology office there. So my day job is basically a hybrid role of doing technology scouting, and then I build sort of proof of concept prototypes. Some of the projects that I worked on last year involved surveying and implementing affective or emotional computing. So computer vision systems that help us decide, are you falling asleep? Are you emotional in your car or vehicle? We worked on smart energy grid management. We surveyed quantum computing and its readiness in the field, and neuromorphic computing, which has to do with building sort of machines that are a little bit more inspired by the architecture of the human brain. And my other role is also head of machine learning at Outco. So I've been building out this class together with David Hopper, who's not on this call with us, but he's part of the founding team. And we are now well into our 5th class. So that's about it. That's what I'm working on now. Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. I had no idea you were just, doing all those crazy things. I'm over here like, yeah, build some full stack web applications. You can like read cool stuff on this app. You're over here like working with brain architectures. So it's really inspiring and dope. So the purpose of this conversation today is I'm just going to read the prompt that we have, right? How do I land my first job in data engineering, data science, or machine learning, right? So we're going to try to focus the conversation today on that topic. And I know there's like people from all types of backgrounds. Some people may have, for example, done some Udacity courses. Some people have had their degree in computer science and are trying to pivot to ML. We're going to try to address as many of those use cases, for lack of a better term, and see what kind of advice Sean has for us in terms of how to break into the industry as a data engineer, a data scientist, and a machine learning expert. Machine learning engineer. What is the thing?
I'm always learning, so I am an engineer.
Sounds good. So I guess like I will start the conversation today by kind of asking you about like your personal like purpose and motivation. What got you into any of this? What is the why, Sean? So that's my first question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So for all of you out there, and as well, Madhur, my big why is actually, I've always wanted to work on how to make humans a better version of ourselves. And I know that sounds like really lofty, but it was sort of this like impulse. Like when I was like 3 or 4, I basically told my parents, like, I want us to be able to basically be like superheroes. Like I think that people should have the ability to, travel into space, to live for as long as we want, to be able to read each other's minds. And sort of the spirit ties into this really cool narrative of the work that I've done while I was at MIT and then at Columbia and at Oxford and Imperial, which was all along the vein of like both how do we as human beings think. Like I studied brain and cognitive science, as well as how do we regenerate our bodies. I studied bioengineering and biological sciences. And then also, how do we create computational constructs? How do we create like automata that are more similar to human beings? And so at the end of the day, I don't know if anyone out there watches Battlestar Galactica, but my big why is actually tied to the spirit of building things similar to Cylons. So those are basically human-like robots. And this is kind of tied into a greater mission of, you know, how do we actually get humanity to transcend our physical and our cognitive limitations? And I think that one really fantastic tool and way for us to do that is through artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'm not saying that that's the only solution, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Wow. All right. So I was not expecting to go super meta, but I'm glad you started the conversation there. So that's definitely some like Disney hero, Disney villain type of stuff. So I'm going to give you hero in this case because, you know, I think you're pretty cool and we've, you know, worked together for a little bit and Sean is dope. So I would just love to hear really quick what your Disney hero name would be if you had one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Disney hero's name.
Yeah.
On the spot. Let's see. So I really like Nikola Tesla because he was all about, I don't know if you guys have heard of 0 point energy, but he sort of said that we had found a solution to that. So he's kind of an inspiration there. And then also Leonardo da Vinci was a huge like Renaissance man who just sort of like, you know, worked in many diverse fields. So maybe something like, why don't we go with Nicola da Vinci? Some
Nicola da
hybrid
Vinci.
of that. Yeah.
Solid. That's really dope to me.
Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm going to do next is kind of just zero in on a few things, right? So again, we're talking about...
Someone in the chat just asked if this is recording. So no,
is this a recording? Oh, okay. I believe it is being recorded. So.
Oh, I thought he meant like we are recording. Okay.
Oh, is this a recording? No, this is live time. So
okay.
Nice to meet you, Deepak, Prasad. How's it going? This is live. I'm here. All right. So basically, just want to zero in from what you said. So we have a large vision, and then I want to zero into every day what machine learning and data science is. So like you've been in industry for a while. So what is the role, right? What is a data science role? What is a data engineering role? What is a machine learning role? Let's just start there, and then we'll talk about how to get one of those. Cool.
Yeah. So one of the interesting aspects of my job is even though I'm nestled within BMW, I actually also like work with and typically collaborate with engineers at other companies. And as I've seen this across various partners just here in Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area, the words for machine learning engineer, and data scientist, they really do functionally vary widely depending on the company that you're at. But in general, there are some important distinguishing factors across the three. So number one, if your title is data engineer, your job predominantly, from what I have observed as well as in our company itself, your job predominantly focuses on building the data infrastructure pipeline. So exactly how do we push data from like raw format all the way to something that data scientists or machine learning engineers can use. Data scientists typically apply like statistics and potentially machine learning in order to analyze already cleaned data, at least at most of the companies that we've collaborated with. I'm not saying that data scientists don't focus on cleaning data, but that tends to be sort of like the role that I've at least encountered in my own experience whenever like I've found a counterpart who is a data scientist. And then machine learning engineer tends to be a bit more amorphous because there's a wide spectrum, but and this is a little bit tied into what we offer at Outco. So the machine learning engineer roles that we've either seen people interview for or what I've had to implement in my own career span across the effective use of supervised machine learning algorithms, unsupervised machine learning algorithms, as well as the use of deep neural networks, specifically computer vision, reinforcement learning, and variations of natural language processing and understanding.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown. So definitely in my run-ins with industry, I remember like those are pretty good sort of boxes to put data science, data engineering, and machine learning in. I think like specifically with machine learning, I feel like there's also like this research scientist angle to it too. Let me know
Yes.
if that's
So
okay.
that's
Cool.
totally correct. Yeah. So and depending on the maturity of the company, they will distinguish that.
Got
So
it.
depending on, like, some companies will have a very clear line between like machine learning researcher or machine learning scientist versus machine learning engineer. In which case, like, typically applied machine learning engineers or machine learning engineers will actually build out the algorithm or modify existing algorithms that are already publicly available, using, again, their knowledge of the software language and the tool. Whereas typically we see the research scientists focusing much more on the theory behind it, right? So they will be focusing on like, how do you actually, why don't we try a different approach mathematically? Let's prove that, and then let's also maybe implement a prototype of that. And what's interesting is in the research role, another output besides a prototype or software is typically also publication. And some of the expectations, if you're looking more into machine learning research scientist roles, also, again, that scientific communication and collaboration aspect is a little bit heavy, like, and the emphasis on theory is a little bit heavier, if that's also what you're looking for. Yeah.
Got it. So I guess real quick, just so if you're on the research scientist end, it's more so research and publications, theory stuff. And if you are not on that side, if you're like more industry focused, you're doing actual like models that you're building and they're going to some output that gets processed and put into the code and deployed later. But you don't worry about that part. You just do the model and process stuff.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it, Madhur.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. So let's say that I am currently in college, right? So I'm in college and I'm studying CS, information science, or any of those variations. And I have a degree from that. And I have maybe taken like one of those online certifications for data science, data engineering, or ML, whether it's on Udacity or Coursera. And now I want to break into the industry and get my first role. Which one of these buckets do you think is the best to transition into first? And you know, what could be like your thought process around like the steps or like, I guess the things that I would encounter in the journey of getting there. So, yeah.
Yeah, so given the context that you provided, if you are tuning in right now, if you're currently an undergraduate and you have a CS degree, you should not have too hard of a time getting a role as like a software engineer or as a data engineer. The data engineer questions typically overlap with a lot of systems engineering and systems design questions that you see pop up in a standard CS curriculum. And the data engineer is a very good bridge between, again, sort of the generalist software engineer role and moving into the machine learning engineering world. This is, of course, assuming that like you haven't taken any like ML model or class. Sorry, you haven't taken any like machine learning engineering class. If you've like learned about the basics of the theory, then I don't see why you would not be qualified for a machine learning engineer role. If that's the case, then my recommendation is to just actually focus and be direct and do the work of actually applying to those types of jobs. An unspoken of secret just in the industry is that we actually tend to see people spam out their resume without customization. And it's super obvious when you do that. So like I can, like, not at my current job, but in the past, I have seen people who could be like, let's say, good fits for machine learning engineer, but then their resumes that they send us like will have almost no reference to any related experience. They'll just like have like one coursework. And so like there are ways for you to like present yourself in the format of a resume that convey your readiness and aptitude to be able to, again, be in a machine learning engineering role.
Got it. That actually segues really nicely into one of my questions that I've listed down. So yeah, what do we look for in resumes when it comes to the ML role or the data engineer role or the data science role?
Yeah, so one of the most important things is actually a comfort with ambiguity, because especially if you are working in a role where you basically need to try different types of machine learning models, there needs to be that comfort with ambiguity. If you're the type of person that needs to be told like, I need to do X, Y, and Z, that's probably not, that's kind of a symbol that at that moment in your life, maybe like ML engineer is not right for you at that, like, again, at that time. I'm not saying that you can't evolve and learn that, but we really do look for people who have like a comfort with the unknown and ambiguity, as well as attention to detail, in the sense that like you have a good foundation and you can apply the tools that you've learned in that foundation, sort of like tools in a toolbox. Yeah. The more frameworks that you have in your mind to think about the same type of problem, the better.
Got it. And when you say foundation, right, what is that foundation skill set?
So yeah, that foundation skill set for the machine learning engineer role would again be your basic statistics, supervised learning, unsupervised learning approaches, and then the application of, again, neural networks for computer vision, natural language processing, and potentially reinforcement learning as well. Reinforcement learning becomes more important, especially if you're like interested in like robotics adjacent type of roles. I don't see that as often in industry, but it is getting there. Yeah.
Got it. So let's say like, let's try to pick a company off the top of my head. So Pinterest, sure, they have a data team that has a lot of data. So I'm somebody that's browsing and looking for similar things and recommendations, right? So in that type of a company, right, I'm sure Amazon does the same thing with products. I'm sure, I guess Facebook with ads a little bit. Which of these, like, do I want to be good at? Like, in terms of like, is that more supervised learning or is that more reinforcement learning?
Yeah, so for building a recommendation system, what we typically see is like variations of supervised learning approaches. There are some interesting applications also of using clustering approaches from unsupervised learning in order to facilitate that. But these are some of the more classical approaches and methods. Yeah.
Got it. So what we're saying is like in the industry with like, if it's a software sided role, right? If it's like software specific in a company like Amazon, Pinterest, Facebook, that's like in the data team, data science, I guess environment, it's going to be more the supervised learning type of stuff that you want to be having under your belt.
Right.
Cool. Got it. So what if I'm currently like a software engineer? So right now, like I guess I've done some full stack engineering work, and I mean, I kind of took like Andrew Ng's Stanford class that everybody takes on Coursera, right? So I've done a few of those lectures over time, right? And I think ML stuff is cool. What's my steps to kind of roll into the ML role? Like, what do I do?
I love that. So this goes a little bit into learning theory. So I will say that if you already have the foundation as a software engineer, you have a lot of potential to be a very valuable asset to people looking for machine learning engineering. Typically what you need, right, if you want to get from point A to point B, is to like fill that gap. What's that gap? It's the foundation of machine learning. And how do you do that? The most clear way the most meta way first on a high level that I can suggest anyone listening in on this call is to have the capacity to focus, to have directness, and then to just drill it. You focus on these like main topics, then be direct in your approach, build out a plan, give yourself that schedule, that structure, and then just drill the knowledge. And when I say drill the knowledge, I mean like first learn the concept, then test your knowledge of that concept. And that's why the value of all these like courses like Andrew Ng's Coursera offering, fast AI, deep learning AI, they are all there and they're all free and online, right? So you, in theory, or I might be misspeaking, I think not all of them are free, but you can do that. And I think that's actually a really great first step. That said, what we typically see is that even though it sounds very nice to just have the focus, directness, and ability to drill, the fact is after you've worked a 9 to 5, most people are a little tired or exhausted or don't have that internal willpower to do the directness and the drilling component. And so that knowledge won't be as acquired either in the time scope that they want. And that's, I would say, where our offer here at Outco can help you, because we give you that structure, we give you that framework, and we basically, you're basically in a Zoom room with me and we're drilling and directly addressing all these concepts across a 4-week time frame. I mean, the fact is, like, and this is no secret, like anyone who's ever tried, I'm sure all of you on this call right now, and we're going to get to your questions in the last like 20 minutes, but you probably all like had a software engineering interview at least once, and you've probably all seen like that the fundamentals of algorithms are up online, right? So the knowledge is all online. It's just like, how do you get it presented and digested to you in a time efficient manner? And that's definitely something that we are specializing in and always trying to improve, and really ensure that when we drill the knowledge into you, you'll be able to retrieve it even in the most unexpected circumstances. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, you brought up the Outco ML program, so I think might as well just segue into that and just talk about that, the curriculum, what it looks like. What type of a person am I like before going into it, and what can I expect when I leave, right? So just it'd be nice to have a breakdown like that.
Yeah, so the typical person that we see come into the Outco ML program is an existing software engineer who may have taken 1 or 2 online classes or even taken machine learning at some point, but has just been in the industry for a while. And our goal in those 4 weeks is to equip them with that theoretical scaffold and framework. So my class does not teach people, you know, like how to do a sorting algorithm. Outco is a great program for that, to teach you data structures and algorithms and become software engineers. And that is the main Outco software engineering program. I think that's been refined over the past 5 years. Really great offering, guys. Madhur actually teaches that in some of the lessons. So that's definitely, if that's where you're at in your life, I would recommend that course. Again, so our course gives you, again, more of the theoretical framework. And we also have people basically, again, drill the knowledge, and then I test your retrieval. So basically, like on the spot, I'll be like, okay, Madhur, so we just talked about like clustering, like, can you give me an example? And I'm pretty blunt, I'm pretty straightforward, and I reflect what you could get in an interview. Because I mean, you know, if you're trying to prep for the interview process, we need to basically get you trained to be comfortable with ambiguity, which I've said like about 10 minutes ago. And you also need to get used to sort of just being put on the spot. So, you know, it's kind of also mindset, and training both the person and the mindset, as well as the ability to use new tools and technologies. That's really key. To return and circle back to your question about who are you before and after you go to the class, you should be comfortable in my course with knowing machine learning applications for data science. So unsupervised and unsupervised algorithms. You'll be comfortable with data modeling. So basically how to work with decision trees, random forest regression. You'll be comfortable with clustering approaches. So like k-means, feature clustering, and gradient boosting. And you might also become comfortable with more of the aspects of like support vector machines and maximum margins. You'll also learn about applied machine learning infrastructure. So we actually in our course teach people how to navigate the Google Cloud platform, because you know, I'm a fan of AWS as well, but I really enjoy the usability of Google Cloud's platform. And that's what we sort of train people how to do, how to implement pipelines. We also are rolling out some Apache Spark and Hadoop proficiency in order for you to be able to build an ML processing pipeline. And in our final week, we cover neural networks. So I basically guide people through the implementation and testing of a convolutional neural network for vision recognition. We implement a small, how do I phrase this? Value-based method reinforcement learning approach. And then we also look at transformers and gated recurrent units, as well as the LSTM classic or natural language processing. So by the end of the course, you'll have drunk from the fire hose and learned not only what they are and how they function theoretically, but you'll also have at least implemented them once in your lifetime. So it also gives you the experience and a small portfolio to draw upon and point to and say, hey, I did this. We're also rolling out projects. So we're creating a framework now for you guys to work on your own projects and add an additional layer of customization.
Cool. So so what I'm hearing is like we kind of on a typical day we like drill on the foundations and then learn in a very interview-based method, and then also there's going to be a stress on projects to just amp up some of the projects you may already have from the classes you may have taken or from other online massive courses you may have taken, right? That's a good summary of that.
Pretty much. So, a lot of the content out there, I don't want to, we have created, and actually the first 4 classes were very much lecture style, but moving forward, we're actually moving away from being purely lecture style. So basically there will be videos, you watch the videos, similar to all the other MOOCs online, but our offering basically is focused on crystallizing that knowledge. I like to think of it as like, okay, so let's pretend that you have, what's a good example? Okay, so like pretend you have like a triangle and it's 2-dimensional. The triangle represents your like first pass or second pass with the knowledge. After a session in a class, you've rotated that. So now you have like this like interesting pyramid cone structure, and you're able to look at it from every angle and recognize it for what it is. That essentially the 3-dimensional form of the pyramid or the cone is in fact a triangle if you slice it in a certain way. And that's sort of like an analogy of how like I try to skill up and help coach and grow the people who go through our program. And how do we do that? I mean, again, we do it through live exercises. We do it through, direct questions. If there's anything unclear in theory, I'm a direct line for you. And there's also a homework component, and then there's like pair programming. Like literally, I think all like 80% of the classes are just like you split up into pair programming, and then we also like review each other. So it's a great opportunity for you to just really learn by doing.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that definitely preps you for like, I guess the basics, right? You have like a resume that has some projects. You hopefully have some work experience already, and you're able to navigate interview conversations that are specific to ML, specific data engineering, and gives you kind of that confidence after a lot of that practice to show up and take space in an interview like you would want to in order to pass it. So I think that's definitely going to get you prepared if you have those backgrounds that we discussed coming into it. Peeping the chat, and people are asking a few questions there. And I also had this question on my side, which is, what about non-CS grads? Or what about people that have not that much computer science background?
Yeah, I'm somewhat of a non-CS grad.
Got it.
Yeah, so like living evidence that you don't have to be a CS grad, right? And in a sense, I think that might also help me, at least for those of you who are not coming from a pure CS background, like that is the approach that I'm taking, right? So I try to teach by analogy. I try to understand like your background and where you're coming from. And every person is different, right? So there isn't like really general advice I can give. If you don't come from a CS background, my main like advice is just like you should adopt a growth mindset and that you can learn it, and that's again like where this actually becomes, we move from being impersonal to personal. I've had students in my class who, without like betraying their identities, like they were all software engineers, but they had either studied like English or like either English or like biology or chemistry, and all of them now are like in the process or are now currently hired as machine learning engineers. So you are not your past, you are just the sum of your experiences, and you are also where you want to go in the future. Side note, if you guys want to read about time crystals, it's like a real thing that came out of MIT when I graduated, and the subtle connection there is that your future state actually can potentially influence your current present state. This is a whole side analogy and nerd out, but
got it.
definitely.
I'm gonna get used to the meta conversation.
Yes.
Sounds good. So I think just to add to that a little bit, someone also asked like, what kind of technical skills do you recommend for an entry-level position in the industry? We've already gone over this a little bit, but I guess specifically what I'm saying is I don't have a CS background, and I potentially don't have a degree in CS or maybe any degree at all. And I've had interest, I've taken some courses on the side, right? What are my next steps to get me closer to breaking in?
Yes. So if you come from, I have a lot of people in my community who actually didn't go to college. And like, even though anyway, so for my friends who actually didn't have a degree, my recommendation is actually to build up your project portfolio. And sometimes, the surprise is that actually a lot of people who have just, a huge array of projects, that demonstrates one of the number one factors to success in this industry, which is your comfort with ambiguity, right? And also it has the dual purpose of illustrating your initiative and your, comfort with the unknown. By having projects then that actually gives us like more of a tangible experience, we can see that that person has actively sought problems to solve instead of had them given to them in the construct of a course or classroom. I'm not saying that learning it in school is bad. It's just if you have a position in life or were born into a place where like you didn't have access to school, that should again not limit you.
Cool. And is there like any external resources that you would recommend for these people that may not have a CS degree or a degree at all? Like just some starter things that you think are useful, or just resources in general?
Yeah, so I mean, this is so general, and I know those of you in the audience will be like, oh my gosh, like this is so general, but there are a lot of resources on YouTube, right? Like I actually have a few very like intro, basic, high level concept videos on YouTube already. You can easily find them online. You can also, Medium has a really great walkthrough through tutorials that people can begin exposing themselves to, particularly towards data science shows up, Hacker Noon. And then if you're looking for, it depends on if you're looking for free or paid. Paid, there are like many options. I think we've already mentioned them here, but there's Coursera, there's EDX, a joint effort between MIT and Harvard. You have, do we say Coursera? There's Udacity, Udemy, and then of course there's Outco. I'm also rolling out a machine learning. I have a beginner machine learning class. So I'm actually rolling out a class online that is dedicated and targeted to people who have zero background in this. And obviously the content there is going to be different. I'm not going to just throw in like the word kernel and not tell you what that is, right? So.
Got it. Yeah. So I actually got a chance to see like a couple of your YouTube videos. So definitely want to plug those. Yeah, I think like Sean's got some great content online as well. So definitely like feel free to follow Sean, because he's going to also be rolling out another course that's like on his personal side that is kind of like a 0 to 1. Let's skill you up from not that much background to having like a good standing and good understanding of the foundation concepts. So you can be ready to go into like more of a formalized, like here's how to interview and get a role type of program, like the Outco program. So just wanted to like give a shout out to those two that are outside of the generic like Udemy, Udacity things that we talked about earlier. Let's see. I'm gonna go through this Q&A in more thorough detail right now. The ones, the audience questions that have come in. So let me just scroll through those and ask a few here.
Sure. Yeah.
So this one says, would you recommend a master's in CS if one has a bachelor's in computer engineering and has worked with ML in undergrad, or attempt to better your skills in a self-learned way and try to get into the industry that way? So master's versus like skill up on your own.
Interesting. So the benefit of doing a master's program, I'm assuming it's a top program, is that you're going to have coursework, right? And it'll be much more heavily theory-based. The nice aspect of doing a master's is that you also inherit a social community. One, that's just raw fun, right? I mean, that's awesome. Like you meet new people. Two, that actually becomes an asset for your career later down the line. So that's the benefit of doing the master's program. The clear con is that it's like way more expensive and time consuming than, let's say, doing a boot camp or a course. The course, sorry, like I'm not just referring to Outco's course, but a course in general, or doing a boot camp or self-learning, all of these options will focus on purely giving you the skill, but it may not give you necessarily like the theory or scope around that as thoroughly as you would in a master's program. So, I mean, a really good question to ask yourself, whoever asked that question, I don't have visibility of most of the chat, but it's like, what is your motivation, right? So like if your motivation is like purely like making money, like, and that's fine, right? Like people need to live and survive. So I totally get it. If your motivation is, you know, that you just want to maximize your income, then I would recommend that you teach yourself, right? The fact is, in the master's program may seem like it can give you like a guaranteed, you know, promise of, what do you call it, the knowledge, but you are going into that environment so that way you will basically learn the skill which you in theory could also do on your own, right? However, and I'm being sensitive about this because like I know people who have gone, some of you in this room and chat have also probably gone through master's programs. I myself also have. The nuance there, right, is that what you realize the benefit of a master's program is also that it gives you, and I mentioned this way earlier in our call, it gives you that directness and that drill, right? Like you are forced to do it because otherwise your money was a total waste. So you were forced to do the homework. You were forced to like work and do it. The difficulty is it's always nice to say like, oh, I'm going to do this project, you know, from 7 to 10 p.m. at night. But depending on how like disciplined you are at your starting point and how just much physical energy you have, a lot of times if there's no push factor from like a program or another person or community, you know, 7 to 10 p.m. after working a 9 to 5 doesn't become realistic for a lot of people. So again, there's just very realistic trade-offs, and I actually love talking about this. So I mean, if you guys also just want to DM me on LinkedIn or email me, I'm happy to help you and at least like guide you a little bit through this decision-making process. Because I've asked myself the same question. I was exactly in the same place like 2.5 years ago, right? Like, yeah, it's a good question.
I got you. I can see you're excited to answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely recommend connecting with Sean for ML questions on LinkedIn. Don't connect with me on LinkedIn for ML questions because all I have done in the ML side is maybe I've opened up Jupyter notebooks like 6 or 7 times. I tried doing this project with like trying to predict the NFL draft. I was way over my head. This is back in 2017, so don't ask me ML questions. But definitely if you have questions about, no, you're good. Definitely if you have questions about like breaking into the industry as a software engineer, so not ML specifically, but like software engineer, full stack, etc. Definitely a good person to connect with. I'll be down to answer those via LinkedIn, via whatever channels. Another great question I see in the chat right now is, where do you find the inspiration for projects, and how complex do you make side projects? I think this is a wonderful question. So go ahead.
It is a wonderful question. Inspiration for projects. Ask yourself, what are the problems that you wanted to solve, right? I mean, throughout, I'm assuming that if you're in this chat room, you're probably over the age of like 13. If there's anyone younger than 13, that's awesome, by the way. But you must have seen problems in the world, problems either in your own personal life, those of your parents, your family, your friends, or your community. Solve those problems, right? But also don't solve a problem if you don't actually care about it. So it should be something that's like personally galvanizing. The reason why, and I know this again sounds so high level and fluffy, but like I'm aware of that, right? But the reason why it is important for it to be something that you care about is because if you don't care about it, you're likely not just going to do it at 8 p.m. after you've worked a full-time day. So it's important for you to figure out, I guess, like what are the problems and story about your own life that you want to tell yourself, right? So like for me, like my story was like, I want to work on like machine consciousness. So something about understanding how brains work, something about how like the body regenerates. For me, that's very interesting. Do I think energy grids are interesting? No, like I've worked on it, I can do it. I do it professionally sometimes, but it's not like my passion. So I wouldn't do a personal project on that. I know the energy grids are really important, but it's just not a personal interest, right? So it needs to be like, again, that fire from within. On the other hand, like looking at like the gene expression for immortality, like that's insanely cool to me. So I'm likely to, you know, work from 8 to 9:30 p.m. on a weeknight doing that. So you need to find like what that internal fire is for you. And then how complex. So I wouldn't overthink that at the beginning, right? Like I mean, yeah, this is going to be very case by case, but like, let's say that it was it depends. I mean, yeah, then we start getting into like, how do you formulate this as a machine learning problem, right? So like, if you're trying to just classify data, is the data that you're trying to work with already labeled? the data is not even labeled, has it been cleaned? These are already questions that you have to start thinking about, because that will influence how easy your project is. A typical strategy is to really just get your hands dirty by doing it. My recommendation would be to, like, let's just say generally, let's like flip it. Let's say that you are interested in the energy grid. Like that's just what you think about every morning and night. I would look online, right, at like public utility data. Go online, find a public resource. On Kaggle, actually, I'm sure that there are people who've explored, like, I don't know, kilowatt hours that have been consumed by specific zip codes. And you could start looking into that there. Again, something that I'm offering out right now, actually, and it's beginning in May, I'm basically willing to at least spend like a good 10, 15 minutes with basically a cluster of people to help them like figure out like what maybe should their first foray into machine learning should and could be in a more bespoke manner. So sort of like what we just did here in like 5 minutes, like I'd love to help you guys also think through that. Also, if you go into the program, this comes with the package. So helping people sort of like career trajectory map and understand like, you know, what are you interested in? How can we bring machine learning into what your interests are? How do we build projects that are clearly defined? It's all part of the offer. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So going off of that, now that we're back to talking about projects, I want to ask that, like, so projects, we got the resume figured out there, but moving on from that, right? What does the rest of the interview process look like, and what is looked for the ML role, right? So I know there's phone screens involved. I know there's on-sites involved. What are they looking for, and what types of questions do you run into from like a general like category perspective, like coding, system design, etc., and even into like details of what is being looked for the ML role? So
yeah, one of the most common questions that will pop up are a question of experience. So I mean that's typically with any job, right? Like, have you done this before, or have you worked in a space adjacent to this role? So the typical interview process: phone screen, often with a non-technical recruiter, then first round interview, typically coding interview, and then you either get a data science project / machine learning project. You get a data set and they ask you to do something with it. Final round is in person, and that's a mixture of assessing soft skills, team fit, and also probably additional technical questions.
cool. Would you mind like breaking down a couple of them a little bit more? So what kind of technical questions, or like as an example, like what's a system design question that's data or ML focused, or like what kind of a coding question could I run into?
Yeah, so let's see. One possible system design question is like, can you please build a machine learning empowered recommendation system for X? How would you build that? And then that is a really nice test, because it actually tells us like at what depth does the person think about this, or not at what depth, but what's their scope. Because the way that you answer that will typically tell me what your background has already been, or what you've been exposed to. So for example, if you start just talking to me about, I don't know, so if you start talking to me about data cleaning and making sure that like the data is like standardized, that it's normalized, that labels are already provided, that shows the meticulousness, but it also shows that they probably had to wrestle with this in the past, right? And that's at the very beginning of the step. I've also had interviews with people who are more theoretical, and they just start getting really deep into clustering algorithms. And then they're like, oh, like, okay, so there are like X features, and then we'll use like feature one, like they'll start breaking these features down into some mathematical framework. Typically what we see in the recommender system problem is adjacent to a concept known as principal component analysis. So if they start breaking that down, talking about covariate matrices, if dimensionality reduction comes up, that tells me this person's more theoretical. They're coming more from this like formal training, or they're more comfortable just with the math. So those are good test questions, because neither of those is wrong or right. They're all partially correct, right? They all are part of the entire structure. And it's really good for helping figure out like where your innate thought processes lie, and also like where you can improve. Machine learning engineer, so that's like a systems design question, and that's why they're fun, because I've already given you the reasons for that.
Right.
Coding interview questions that I still see pop up even for machine learning engineers actually are dynamic programming questions. I find that
My
interesting
favorite
because,
thing ever.
yeah, so this is
I'm
one
being
thing I was
serious.
actually, yeah. It's a nice framework because the way of thinking that is required to be successful at solving and breaking and recognizing dynamic programming is very similar to the way of thinking anticipated and expected machine learning engineering, and that like there is a general framework, but each problem presents itself slightly differently. But there are patterns that you basically need to apply in new and creative ways. It's funny because I think all of you who are in this call, some of you might have friends who think that being a software engineer is like so logical and like pure, not creative at all. But I know some of you here are probably chuckling to yourselves thinking like, wait, no, actually this career is so creative. And dynamic programming is an opportunity for us to actually see that creativity unfold during the interview process, assuming that you don't get stressed out or worried about the algorithm. And so actually in our curriculum, we do a review for DP, dynamic programming, and recursion as well. We overlap with the main class on that in that regard. But yeah, DP problems, good test. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I am also seeing a lot of like logistics questions of like, can we have links to these things, or like how much does the program cost? And I believe we're having info sessions specifically to the programs. So I would love
That's
for,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually
That's right.
sign up
Yes.
for an info session that will send all of the details there. We want to make sure we focus the conversation here more on like the breaking into the industry, right? But what day of the week best suits you for an Outco info session? Cool. So I think there's a poll going on right now about like when you can potentially attend info sessions that are specific to the Outco ML program and the Outco Tech program. So links are in the chat to sign up, and I think the poll is requesting like potential times that you can join us for the info session. So that's what we're more going over the logistical questions about the program itself.
Cool. Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, all
good.
the logistic questions we can share with you guys in the info session. Also, if you DM me, I will respond.
Got it. So actually, there's a great question in the chat right now. It says, I'm an entrepreneurship major with a minor in IT with advanced Excel skills, beginner to intermediate Python skills, and R as well, along with SQL and VBA. Can I enter the data science field with these skills? What am I missing? And before you answer that, I think to segue it a little bit more, what kind of other roles are associated around this ML data science, data engineering roles, right? I'm sure there's all these data science teams have a PM. All these data science teams may have operations. So what are the other like pivots that are within the data science sort of family, but are a little bit more adjacent? So feel free to like expand on that too, to address this question.
Yeah, I can work backwards. Yeah, so adjacent roles. There's always an ML, like in more large organizations, you'll typically see like a machine learning project manager or program manager. Project and program, depending on the company, are either the same or different. Projects typically refer to like managing many different types of ML projects within a company. Program usually has them all under like one umbrella. So like if you're working on, so there's program, there's project. Product managers are people who are like focusing on one product. So like a good example, right, is like I have 3 projects at my company. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but like a product manager would be focusing on like, how do we improve this product, this physical product, this cup. Program manager may be focusing on how do we improve our cup sales promotion program, right? And then project is like, oh, like how do we facilitate the projects between people who are partnering with this with sales of our cup and I don't know, some of our affiliate marketers. I'm just like, again, throwing this up off the top of my head, but all these type of like more PM roles, they are definitely adjacent to and focus more on the business aspect of artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's also like machine learning manager, which is like a little bit more senior. So those are people who are basically managing groups of machine learning engineers. That's typically like parallel to people just being software engineers and then moving up the ladder, but they've decided that instead of focusing on refining their code, you know, they're more interested in refining the people behind the code, right? Now for that person in the group, you said that you're an entrepreneurship major with an IT minor and you have a lot of database experience. I mean, yeah, given all of your database experience, I love that you have an entrepreneurship major. I've never heard of that actually, but that's very cool. I mean, I would say like, hey, why not try out your own company, given that's the major, right? And maybe it would be cool for you to be in the role of a data engineer. Data engineer would make sense because I see, like, especially if you've been working a lot with different types of databases, that's somewhere where you can hit the ground quickly. And then once you're internally in a company, you can like scope the field and see like, oh, are there opportunities here for machine learning? Not saying that you can't learn machine learning. It's just when I hear that background, like knowing nothing else about you, just like a disembodied person in this chat, I think that it tells a really powerful and nice story for someone looking to become a data engineer, just given that background. Yeah.
Got it. So more of a data engineering pivot, given the data background with some entrepreneurship stuff going on. So that's a good starting point. And I feel like I agree because data engineer roles are more parallel with like software engineering / full stack. And I would say like amongst the backgrounds that are required to break into those, definitely less on the master's research / you know, you don't even have those advanced degrees necessarily to break into data engineer / software engineer / full stack engineer. So that's a good like pivot suggestion that Sean just made there. Similar to, since we're on the topic of data engineering, someone has a database engineer background, and they have primarily worked with like relation database management systems, and they have done introductory Python, some Cassandra stuff. Okay, distributed databases, cool. And let's see. And I've gone through some content online, probably on machine learning. Let's see. They are interested in data engineer roles, but don't have that much big data experience. What do you suggest to break into data engineering?
Yeah, I guess so. That's a little curious because I don't understand how you have like Cassandra experience that haven't worked with big data. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, because I saw Cassandra, I was like, oh, cool. But I've actually yet to run into someone that's like, I know for a fact has worked with Cassandra like at industry level. So,
wait, sorry, but yeah, so what was the question for that?
I think the question is that they have some database background with relation database management, but they don't feel like they have enough big data experience to break into like data engineer roles. So maybe this could be project level is what I'm assuming, and not industry experience level. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, again, so my advice to you, depending on how self-starter you are feeling, is if you feel like you don't have enough big data experience, then I would suggest that you start finding sources for big data and then work on a personal project that is tied to that. And again, like there's a lot of like big data out there now. There are a lot of open source websites for you to check out. I think we've mentioned them already, like Kaggle. The US government's actually just released some as well. And yeah, doing projects would be like my main advice. Although also for the person who asked that question, I noticed that in the language that you use, you said you feel. So I'd like to also maybe clarify, like maybe why don't you check out some of the roles, because it's possible that you might think that you don't have the background, but actually the people looking for people like you think you do, right? So it's possible that this actually could be an internal thing. Well, like you might be interpreting it like, oh, I don't know, I'm not enough, but actually because you have all this other database experience, they would actually love that. And they're probably acknowledging like, yeah, this person is in X role. And obviously they don't have a lot of big data experience, but given the fact they have all this other data experience in the nebula of options given to them, they can probably learn it and become better at it if we hire them. That's another way to also look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was going to add to this. So I think generic advice that we give to no matter which program you're a part of is, especially for entry level or trying to break in, is apply to a lot of jobs and apply to every single type of job as well. So even if it says like looking for senior, super hella senior engineer in whatever domain, right? Apply to that one, because what's going to happen is you're going to get in front of a recruiter or get in front of someone from that team and have a real conversation, most likely, right? And it's on your end to actually ask them the questions like, hey, like, what are you looking for? What kind of void are you trying to fill when you want someone to work on this role, right? Like, what usually happens is in a company, somebody that's working on an engineering team leaves or like switches to a different team, and you have an engineering manager that has like a deadline, that like a quarterly deadline of like, I need to get all these sprint stories and these features built by X date. I need a new person to join my team in order to make that happen, right? So your job as someone who's being interviewed is to actually like ask them those questions like, hey, what exactly are you looking for this team, right? And you can actually like figure out like your whole job is to have that conversation during that application process and come towards a match, right? So they have a list of requirements on their end. You have your own requirements on your end, right? It's your job to kind of make those meet, right? Okay, so you're looking to fill this void. Great. So you're looking for these 5 to 10 skills. I can do like 4 or 5 of them right now, right? I feel like I can take space here and then get myself on board to the other 5 skills when I get started. So it's for you to like navigate that conversation. Quick anecdotal story there is that I actually interviewed for a senior full stack engineer role at Medium, and I started by so that's the interview I gave, and I actually got a junior front end role as a result of going through that process. So because it opened up like a week before my actual onsite, and I just fit right in based on my experience. So you never know what's going on the company side of things either. So just want to specify, like, you want to apply a lot, and that's generic advice that I want to give there. So
but it's good advice. It's good generic advice.
So we're coming to an end here. So I just want to, I want to end this by saying a few things. So we're having an info session on the ML program and on the Outco Tech program. I believe it might be the same session as well. Dan and Richie, feel free to clarify that in the chat. Someone also asked if there's going to be recording available. So the link is there in the chat to sign up for the info session. I think we're going to be sending out a recording link, but make sure that that's there. So to wrap up everything, Sean, I just have one last question to bring it all together. So if you have like a 1 to 2 sentence advice of how to break into data science, data engineering, machine learning, what am I doing? What am I focusing on? What do I do? 1 to 2 sentence summary. Go.
If you want to break into machine learning, then the most important aspect to change is your mindset, thereby adopting a growth mindset and acquiring the framework and the discipline to drill all those habits and skills into your mind. Totally on the fly. I hope that was like succinct enough. But yeah, mindset and discipline.
Mindset and discipline. Cool.
Always easier said than done.
And I'm mainly focusing on supervised learning and unsupervised learning and reinforcement. Those are like the 3 sort of big things, right?
Supervised, unsupervised learning, and neural networks.
Neural networks as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was our session today on how to break into data science, data engineering, and machine learning. Sean, thanks so much for joining us and answering all those questions from every direction. So
no, it was fun. Thanks for having me, Madhur.
Yeah. Sounds good. So Dan, Richie, let us know what the next steps are. I think we're going to close out the Zoom most likely. Is that how we're transitioning out? So feel free to jump in here.